Hello there, my old friend. Tonight, our quest takes us through a collection of old fairy tales written down by Hans Christian Andersen. Now, settle in, take a deep breath, and let's travel back to an age of myth and legend. The Tinderbox. A soldier came marching along the high road. Left, right, left, right. He had his knapsack on his back and a sword at his side. He had been to the wars and was now returning home. As he walked on, he met a very frightful-looking old witch in the road. Her underlip hung quite down on her breast, and she stopped and said, "Good evening, soldier. You have a very fine sword and a large knapsack, and you are a real soldier, so you shall have as much money as ever you like." "Thank you, old witch," said the soldier. "Do you see that large tree?" said the witch, pointing to a tree which stood beside them. "Well, it is quite hollow inside, and you must climb to the top, when you will see a hole through which you can let yourself down into the tree to a great depth. I will tie a rope round your body so that I can pull you up again when you call out to me." "But what am I to do down there in the tree?" asked the soldier. "Get money," she replied, "for you must know that when you reach the ground under the tree, you will find yourself in a large hall, lighted up by 300 lamps. You will then see 3 doors, which can be easily opened, for the keys are in all the locks. On entering the first of the chambers to which these doors lead, you will see a large chest standing in the middle of the floor, and upon it a dog seated, with a pair of eyes as large as teacups. But you need not be at all afraid of him. I will give you my blue checked apron, which you must spread upon the floor, and then boldly seize hold of the dog and place him upon it. You can then open the chest and take from it as many pence as you please. They are only copper pence, but if you would rather have silver money, you must go into the second chamber. Here you will find another dog, with eyes as big as mill wheels. But do not let that trouble you. Place him upon my apron, and then take what money you please. If, however, you like gold best, enter the third chamber, where there is another chest full of it. The dog who sits on this chest is very dreadful. His eyes are as big as a tower, but do not mind him. If he also is placed upon my apron, he cannot hurt you, and you may take from the chest what gold you will." "This is not a bad story," said the soldier. "But what am I to give you, you old witch? For of course you do not mean to tell me all this for nothing." "No," said the witch, "but I do not ask for a single penny. Only promise to bring me an old tinderbox, which my grandmother left behind the last time she went down there." "Very well, I promise. Now tie the rope round my body." "Here it is," replied the witch, "and here is my blue checked apron." As soon as the rope was tied, the soldier climbed up the tree and let himself down through the hollow to the ground beneath. And here he found, as the witch had told him, a large hall in which many hundred lamps were all burning. Then he opened the first door. Ah, there sat the dog, with the eyes as large as teacups, staring at him. "You're a pretty fellow," said the soldier, seizing him and placing him on the witch's apron, while he filled his pockets from the chest with as many pieces as they would hold. Then he closed the lid, seated the dog upon it again, and walked into another chamber, and sure enough, there sat the dog with eyes as big as mill wheels. "You had better not look at me in that way," said the soldier. "You will make your eyes water." And then he seated him also upon the apron and opened the chest. But when he saw what a quantity of silver money it contained, he very quickly threw away all the coppers he had taken and filled his pockets and his knapsack with nothing but silver. Then he went into the third room, and there the dog was really hideous. His eyes were truly as big as towers, and they turned round and round in his head like wheels. "Good morning," said the soldier, touching his cap, for he had never seen such a dog in his life. But after looking at him more closely, he thought he had been civil enough, so he placed him on the floor and opened the chest. Good gracious, what a quantity of gold there was! Enough to buy all the sugar sticks of the sweet stuff women, all the tin soldiers, whips, and rocking horses in the world, or even the whole town itself. There was, indeed, an immense quantity. So the soldier now threw away all the silver money he had taken, and filled his pockets and his knapsack with gold instead. And not only his pockets and his knapsack, but even his cap and boots, so that he could scarcely walk. He was really rich now, so he replaced the dog on the chest, closed the door, and called up through the tree, "Now pull me out, you old witch." "Have you got the Tinderbox?" asked the witch. "No, I declare I quite forgot it." So he went back and fetched the Tinderbox, and then the witch drew him up out of the tree, and he stood again in the high road, with his pockets, his knapsack, his cap, and his boots full of gold. "What are you going to do with the Tinderbox?" asked the soldier. "That is nothing to you," replied the witch. "You have the money, now give me the Tinderbox." "I tell you what," said the soldier, "if you don't tell me what you are going to do with it, I will draw my sword and cut off your head." "No," said the witch. The soldier immediately cut off her head, and there she lay on the ground. Then he tied up all his money in her apron and slung it on his back like a bundle, put the Tinderbox in his pocket, and walked off to the nearest town. It was a very nice town, and he put up at the best inn and ordered a dinner of all his favourite dishes, for now he was rich and had plenty of money. The servant, who cleaned his boots, thought they certainly were a shabby pair to be worn by such a rich gentleman, for he had not yet bought any new ones. The next day, however, he procured some good clothes and proper boots, so that our soldier soon became known as a fine gentleman, and the people visited him and told him all the wonders that were to be seen in the town, and of the king's beautiful daughter, the princess. "Where can I see her?" asked the soldier. "She is not to be seen at all," they said. "She lives in a large copper castle, surrounded by walls and towers. No one but the king himself can pass in or out, for there has been a prophecy that she will marry a common soldier, and the king cannot bear to think of such a marriage." "I should like very much to see her," thought the soldier, but he could not obtain permission to do so. However, he passed a very pleasant time, went to the theatre, drove in the king's garden, and gave a great deal of money to the poor, which was very good of him. He remembered what it had been in olden times to be without a shilling. Now he was rich, had fine clothes, and many friends, who all declared he was a fine fellow and a real gentleman, and all this gratified him exceedingly. But his money would not last forever, and as he spent and gave away a great deal daily and received none, he found himself at last with only 2 shillings left. So he was obliged to leave his elegant rooms and live in a little garret under the roof, where he had to clean his own boots and even mend them with a large needle. None of his friends came to see him. There were too many stairs to mount up. One dark evening, he had not even a penny to buy a candle. Then all at once he remembered that there was a piece of candle stuck in the tinderbox, which he had brought from the old tree, into which the witch had helped him. He found the tinderbox, but no sooner had he struck a few sparks from the flint and steel than the door flew open, and the dog with eyes as big as teacups, whom he had seen while down in the tree, stood before him and said, "What orders, master?" "Hallo," said the soldier. "Well, this is a pleasant tinderbox, if it brings me all I wish for." "Bring me some money," said he to the dog. He was gone in a moment, and presently returned, carrying a large bag of coppers in his month. The soldier very soon discovered after this the value of the tinderbox. If he struck the flint once, the dog who sat on the chest of copper money made his appearance. If twice, the dog came from the chest of silver, and if 3 times, the dog with eyes like towers, who watched over the gold. The soldier had now plenty of money. He returned to his elegant rooms and reappeared in his fine clothes, so that his friends knew him again directly and made as much of him as before. After a while, he began to think it was very strange that no one could get a look at the princess. "Everyone says she is very beautiful," thought he to himself. "But what is the use of that if she is to be shut up in a copper castle surrounded by so many towers? Can I by any means get to see her? Stop, where is my tinderbox?" Then he struck a light, and in a moment the dog, with eyes as big as teacups, stood before him. "It is midnight," said the soldier, "yet I should very much like to see the princess, if only for a moment." The dog disappeared instantly, and before the soldier could even look round, he returned with the princess. She was lying on the dog's back asleep, and looked so lovely that everyone who saw her would know she was a real princess. The soldier could not help kissing her, true soldier as he was. Then the dog ran back with the princess. But in the morning, while at breakfast with the king and queen, she told them what a singular dream she had had during the night, of a dog and a soldier, that she had ridden on the dog's back and been kissed by the soldier. "That is a very pretty story indeed," said the queen. So the next night, one of the old ladies of the court was set to watch by the princess's bed, to discover whether it really was a dream, or what else it might be. The soldier longed very much to see the princess once more, so he sent for the dog again in the night to fetch her, and to run with her as fast as ever he could. But the old lady put on water boots, and ran after him as quickly as he did, and found that he carried the princess into a large house. She thought it would help her to remember the place if she made a large cross on the door with a piece of chalk. Then she went home to bed, and the dog presently returned with the princess. But when he saw that a cross had been made on the door of the house where the soldier lived, he took another piece of chalk and made crosses on all the doors in the town, so that the lady in waiting might not be able to find out the right door. Early the next morning, the king and queen accompanied the lady and all the officers of the household, to see where the princess had been. "Here it is," said the king, when they came to the first door with a cross on it. "No, my dear husband, it must be that one," said the queen, pointing to a second door having a cross also. "And here is one, and there is another," they all exclaimed, for there were crosses on all the doors in every direction. So they felt it would be useless to search any farther. But the queen was a very clever woman. She could do a great deal more than merely ride in a carriage. She took her large gold dizzers, cut a piece of silk into squares, and made a neat little bag. This bag she filled with buckwheat flour and tied it round the princess's neck, and then she cut a small hole in the bag so that the flour might be scattered on the ground as the princess went along. During the night the dog came again and carried the princess on his back and ran with her to the soldier, who loved her very much and wished that he had been a prince, so that he might have her for a wife. The dog did not observe how the flour ran out of the bag all the way from the castle wall to the soldier's house, and even up to the window where he had climbed with the princess. Therefore, in the morning, the king and queen found out where their daughter had been, and the soldier was taken up and put in prison. Oh, how dark and disagreeable it was as he sat there, and the people said to him, "Tomorrow you will be hanged." It was not very pleasant news, and besides, he had left the tinderbox at the inn. In the morning he could see through the iron grating of the little window how the people were hastening out of the town to see him hanged. He heard the drums beating and saw the soldiers marching. Everyone ran out to look at them, and a shoemaker's boy, with a leather apron and slippers on, galloped by so fast that one of his slippers flew off and struck against the wall where the soldier sat looking through the iron grating. "Hallo, you shoemaker's boy, you need not be in such a hurry," cried the soldier to him. "There will be nothing to see till I come. But if you will run to the house where I have been living and bring me my tinderbox, you shall have 4 shillings, but you must put your best foot foremost." The shoemaker's boy liked the idea of getting the 4 shillings, so he ran very fast and fetched the tinderbox and gave it to the soldier. And now we shall see what happened. Outside the town, a large gibbet had been erected, round which stood the soldiers and several thousands of people. The king and the queen sat on splendid thrones opposite to the judges and the whole council. The soldier already stood on the ladder, but as they were about to place the rope around his neck, he said that an innocent request was often granted to a poor criminal before he suffered death. He wished very much to smoke a pipe, as it would be the last pipe he should ever smoke in the world. The king could not refuse this request, so the soldier took his tinderbox and struck fire once, twice, thrice, and there in a moment stood all the dogs, the one with eyes as big as teacups, the one with eyes as large as mill wheels, and the third, whose eyes were like towers. "Help me now, that I may not be hanged," cried the soldier. And the dogs fell upon the judges and all the councillors, seized one by the legs and another by the nose, and tossed them many feet high in the air, so that they fell down and were dashed to pieces. "I will not be touched," said the king. But the largest dog seized him, as well as the queen, and threw them after the others. Then the soldiers and all the people were afraid, and cried, "Good soldier, "You shall be our king, and you shall marry the beautiful princess." So they placed the soldier in the king's carriage, and the 3 dogs ran on in front and cried, "Hurrah!" And the little boys whistled through their fingers, and the soldiers presented arms. The princess came out of the copper castle and became queen, which was very pleasing to her. The wedding festivities lasted a whole week, and the dogs sat at the table and stared with all their eyes. The toad. The well was deep, and therefore the rope had to be a long one. It was heavy work turning the handle when anyone had to raise a bucketful of water over the edge of the well. Though the water was clear, the sun never looked down far enough into the well to mirror itself in the waters. But as far as its beams could reach, green things grew forth between the stones in the sides of the well. Down below dwelt a family of the toad race. They had, in fact, come head over heels down the well, in the person of the old mother toad, who was still alive. The green frogs, who had been established there a long time and swam about in the water, called them well guests. But the newcomers seemed determined to stay where they were, for they found it very agreeable living in a dry place, as they called the wet stones. The mother frog had once been a traveller. She happened to be in the water bucket when it was drawn up, but the light became too strong for her, and she got a pain in her eyes. Fortunately, she scrambled out of the bucket, but she fell into the water with a terrible flop, and had to lie sick for 3 days with pains in her back. She certainly had not much to tell of the things up above, but she knew this, and all the frogs knew it, that the well was not all the world. The mother toad might have told this and that if she had chosen, but she never answered when they asked her anything, and so they left off asking. "She's thick and fat and ugly," said the young green frogs, "and her children will be just as ugly as she is." "That may be," retorted the mother toad, "but one of them has a jewel in his head, or else I have the jewel." The young frogs listened and stared, and as these words did not please them, they made grimaces and dived down under the water. But the little toads kicked up their hind legs from mere pride, for each of them thought that he must have the jewel. And then they sat and held their heads quite still. But at length they asked what it was that made them so proud, and what kind of a thing a jewel might be. "Oh, it is such a splendid and precious thing that I cannot describe it," said the mother toad. "It's something which one carries about for one's own pleasure, and that makes other people angry. But don't ask me any questions, for I shan't answer you." "Well, I haven't got the jewel," said the smallest of the toads. She was as ugly as a toad can be. "Why should I have such a precious thing? And if it makes others angry, it can't give me any pleasure. No, I only wish I could get to the edge of the well and look out. It must be beautiful up there." "You'd better stay where you are," said the old mother toad, "for you know everything here, and you can tell what you have. Take care of the bucket, for it will crush you to death, and even if you get into it safely, you may fall out. And it's not everyone who falls so cleverly as I did, and gets away with whole legs and whole bones." "Quack," said the little toad, "and that's just as if one of us were to say, 'Aha.'" She had an immense desire to get to the edge of the well and to look over. She felt such a longing for the green up there. And the next morning, when it chanced that the bucket was being drawn up, filled with water, and stopped for a moment just in front of the stone on which the toad sat, the little creature's heart moved within it, and our toad jumped into the filled bucket, which presently was drawn to the top and emptied out. "Ugh, you beast," said the farm labourer who emptied the bucket when he saw the toad. "You're the ugliest thing I've seen for one while." And he made a kick with his wooden shoe at the toad, which just escaped being crushed by managing to scramble into the nettles which grew high by the well's brink. Here she saw stem by stem, but she looked up also. The sun shone through the leaves, which were quite transparent, and she felt as a person would feel who steps suddenly into a great forest, where the sun looks in between the branches and leaves. "It's much nicer here than down in the well. I should like to stay here my whole life long," said the little toad. So she lay there for an hour, yes, for 2 hours. "I wonder what is to be found up here. As I have come so far, I must try to go still farther." And so she crawled on as fast as she could crawl, and got out upon the highway, where the sun shone upon her, and the dust powdered her all over as she marched across the way. "I've got to a dry place now, and no mistake," said the toad. "It's almost too much of a good thing here. It tickles one so." She came to the ditch, and forget-me-nots were growing there, and meadow sweet, and a very little way off was a hedge of whitethorn, and elder bushes grew there too, and bindweed with white flowers. Gay colours were to be seen here, and a butterfly too was flitting by. The toad thought it was a flower which had broken loose that it might look about better in the world, which was quite a natural thing to do. "If one could only make such a journey as that," said the toad. "Croak, how capital that would be." 8 days and 8 nights she stayed by the well, and experienced no want of provisions. On the 9th day she thought, "Forward, onward." But what could she find more charming and beautiful? Perhaps a little toad, or a few green frogs. During the last night there had been a sound borne on the breeze, as if there were cousins in the neighbourhood. It's a glorious thing to live, glorious to get out of the well, and to lie among the stinging nettles, and to crawl along the dusty road. But onward, onward, that we may find frogs or a little toad. We can't do without that. Nature alone is not enough for one. And so she went forward on her journey. She came out into the open field, to a great pond, round about which grew reeds, and she walked into it. "It will be too damp for you here," said the frogs, "but you are very welcome. Are you a he or a she? But it doesn't matter. You are equally welcome." And she was invited to the concert in the evening, the family concert. Great enthusiasm and thin voices. We know the sort of thing. No refreshments were given, only there was plenty to drink, for the whole pond was free. "Now I shall resume my journey," said the little toad, for she always felt a longing for something better. She saw the stars shining, so large and so bright, and she saw the moon gleaming, and then she saw the sun rise and mount higher and higher. Perhaps after all, I am still in a well, only in a larger well. I must get higher yet. I feel a great restlessness and longing. And when the moon became round and full, the poor creature thought, I wonder if that is the bucket which will be let down, and into which I must step to get higher up. Or is the sun the great bucket? How great it is! How bright it is! It can take up all. I must look out, that I may not miss the opportunity. Oh, how it seems to shine in my head. I don't think the jewel can shine brighter. But I haven't the jewel, not that I cry about that. No, I must go higher up, into splendor and joy. I feel so confident, and yet I am afraid. It's a difficult step to take, and yet it must be taken. Onward, therefore, straight onward. She took a few steps, such as a crawling animal may take, and soon found herself on a road beside which people dwelt. But there were flower gardens as well as kitchen gardens, and she sat down to rest by a kitchen garden. What a number of different creatures there are that I never knew, and how beautiful and great the world is. But one must look round in it, and not stay in one spot. And then she hopped into the kitchen garden. How green it is here! How beautiful it is here! I know that, said the caterpillar on the leaf. My leaf is the largest here. It hides half the world from me, but I don't care for the world. Cluck, cluck. And some fowls came. They tripped about in the cabbage garden. The fowl who marched at the head of them had a long sight, and she spied the caterpillar on the green leaf and pecked at it, so that the caterpillar fell on the ground, where it twisted and writhed. The fowl looked at it first with one eye and then with the other, for she did not know what the end of this writhing would be. It doesn't do that with a good will, thought the fowl, and lifted up her head to peck at the caterpillar. The toad was so horrified at this that she came crawling straight up towards the fowl. Aha, it has allies, quoth the fowl. Just look at the crawling thing. And then the fowl turned away. I don't care for the little green morsel. It would only tickle my throat. The other fowls took the same view of it, and they all turned away together. I writhed myself free, said the caterpillar. What a good thing it is when one has presence of mind. But the hardest thing remains to be done, and that is to get on my leaf again. Where is it? And the little toad came up and expressed her sympathy. She was glad that in her ugliness she had frightened the fowls. What do you mean by that? Cried the caterpillar. I wriggled myself free from the fowl. You are very disagreeable to look at. Cannot I be left in peace on my own property? Now I smell cabbage. Now I am near my leaf. Nothing is so beautiful as property. But I must go higher up. Yes, higher up, said the little toad. Higher up. She feels just as I do, but she's not in a good humor today. That's because of the fright. We all want to go higher up. And she looked up as high as ever she could. The stork sat in his nest on the roof of the farmhouse. He clapped with his beak, and the mother stork clapped with hers. How high up they live, thought the toad. If one could only get as high as that. In the farmhouse lived two young students. The one was a poet, and the other a scientific searcher into the secrets of nature. The one sang and wrote joyously of everything that God had created, and how it was mirrored in his heart. He sang it out clearly, sweetly, richly, in well-sounding verses, while the other investigated created matter itself, and even cut it open where need was. He looked upon God's creation as a great sum in arithmetic, subtracted, multiplied, and tried to know it within and without, and to talk with understanding concerning it. And that was a very sensible thing, and he spoke joyously and cleverly of it. They were good, joyful men, those two. "There sits a good specimen of a toad," said the naturalist. "I must have that fellow in a bottle of spirits." "You have two of them already," replied the poet. "Let the thing sit there and enjoy its life." "But it's so wonderfully ugly," persisted the first. "Yes, if we could find the jewel in its head," said the poet, "I too should be for cutting it open." "A jewel," cried the naturalist. "You seem to know a great deal about natural history. But is there not something beautiful in the popular belief that just as the toad is the ugliest of animals, it should often carry the most precious jewel in its head? Is it not just the same thing with men? What a jewel that was that Aesop had, and still more Socrates." The toad did not hear any more, nor did she understand half of what she had heard. The two friends walked on, and thus she escaped the fate of being bottled up in spirits. "Those two also were speaking of the jewel," said the toad to herself. "What a good thing that I have not got it. I might have been in a very disagreeable position." Now there was a clapping on the roof of the farmhouse. Father Stork was making a speech to his family, and his family was glancing down at the two young men in the kitchen garden. "Man is the most conceited creature," said the stork. "Listen how their jaws are wagging, and for all that they can't clap properly. They boast of their gifts of eloquence and their language. Yes, a fine language truly. Why, it changes in every day's journey we make. One of them doesn't understand another. Now we can speak our language over the whole earth, up in the north and in Egypt, and then men are not able to fly, moreover. They rush along by means of an invention they call railway, but they often break their necks over it. It makes my beak turn cold when I think of it. The world could get on without men. We could do without them very well, so long as we only keep frogs and earthworms." That was a powerful speech, thought the little toad. What a great man that is yonder, and how high he sits, higher than ever I saw anyone sit yet, and how he can swim, she cried, as the stork soared away through the air with outspread pinions. And the mother stork began talking in the nest, and told about Egypt and the waters of the Nile, and the incomparable mud that was to be found in that strange land. And all this sounded new and very charming to the little toad. "I must go to Egypt," said she, "if the stork or one of his young ones would only take me. I would oblige him in return. Yes, I shall get to Egypt, for I feel so happy. All the longing and all the pleasure that I feel is much better than having a jewel in one's head." And it was just she who had the jewel. That jewel was the continual striving and desire to go upward, ever upward. It gleamed in her head, gleamed in joy, beamed brightly in her longing. Then, suddenly, up came the stork. He had seen the toad in the grass, and stooped down and seized the little creature anything but gently. The stork's beak pinched her, and the wind whistled. It was not exactly agreeable, but she was going upward, upward towards Egypt, and she knew it. And that was why her eyes gleamed, and a spark seemed to fly out of them. Quunk! Ah! The body was dead, the toad was killed. but the spark that had shot forth from her eyes. What became of that? The sunbeam took it up. The sunbeam carried the jewel from the head of the toad. Whither? Ask not the naturalist, rather ask the poet. He will tell it thee under the guise of a fairy tale. And the caterpillar on the cabbage and the stalk family belong to the story. Think, the caterpillar is changed and turns into a beautiful butterfly. The stalk family flies over mountains and seas to the distant Africa, and yet finds the shortest way home to the same country, to the same roof. Nay, that is almost too improbable. And yet it is true. You may ask the naturalist. He will confess it is so. And you know it yourself, for you have seen it. But the jewel in the head of the toad, seek it in the sun. See it there if you can. The brightness is too dazzling there. We have not yet such eyes as can see into the glories which God has created, but we shall receive them by and by. And that will be the most beautiful story of all, and we shall all have our share in it. The top and ball. A whipping top and a little ball lay together in a box, among other toys, and the top said to the ball, "Shall we be married, as we live in the same box?" But the ball, which wore a dress of Morocco leather, and thought as much of herself as any other young lady, would not even condescend to reply. The next day came the little boy to whom the playthings belonged, and he painted the top red and yellow, and drove a brass-headed nail into the middle, so that while the top was spinning round, it looked splendid. "Look at me," said the top to the ball. "What do you say now? Shall we be engaged to each other? We should suit so well. You spring, and I dance. No one could be happier than we should be." "Indeed, do you think so? Perhaps you do not know that my father and mother were Morocco slippers, and that I have a Spanish cork in my body." "Yes, but I am made of mahogany," said the top. "The Major himself turned me. He has a turning lathe of his own, and it is a great amusement to him." "Can I believe it?" asked the ball. "May I never be whipped again," said the top, "if I am not telling you the truth." "You certainly know how to speak for yourself very well," said the ball, "but I cannot accept your proposal. I am almost engaged to a swallow. Every time I fly up in the air, he puts his head out of the nest and says, 'Will you?' And I have said yes to myself silently, and that is as good as being half engaged, but I will promise never to forget you." "Much good that will be to me," said the top, and they spoke to each other no more. Next day, the ball was taken out by the boy. The top saw it flying high in the air like a bird, till it would go quite out of sight. Each time it came back, as it touched the earth, it gave a higher leap than before, either because it longed to fly upwards, or from having a Spanish cork in its body. But the 9th time it rose in the air, it remained away, and did not return. The boy searched everywhere for it, but he searched in vain, for it could not be found. It was gone. "I know very well where she is," sighed the top. "She is in the swallow's nest, and has married the swallow." The more the top thought of this, the more he longed for the ball. His love increased the more, just because he could not get her, and that she should have been won by another was the worst of all. The top still twirled about and hummed, but he continued to think of the ball, and the more he thought of her, the more beautiful she seemed to his fancy. Thus several years passed by, and his love became quite old. The top, also, was no longer young, but there came a day when he looked handsomer than ever, for he was gilded all over. He was now a golden top, and whirled and danced about till he hummed quite loud, and was something worth looking at. But one day he leapt too high, and then he, also, was gone. They searched everywhere, even in the cellar, but he was nowhere to be found. Where could he be? He had jumped into the dustbin, where all sorts of rubbish were lying, cabbage stalks, dust, and rain droppings that had fallen down from the gutter under the roof. "Now I am in a nice place," said he. "My gilding will soon be washed off here. Oh dear, what a set of rabble I have got amongst." And then he glanced at a curious round thing like an old apple, which lay near a long, leafless cabbage stalk. It was, however, not an apple, but an old ball, which had lain for years in the gutter and was soaked through with water. "Thank goodness, here comes one of my own class, with whom I can talk," said the ball, examining the gilded top. "I am made of Morocco," she said. "I was sewn together by a young lady, and I have a Spanish cork in my body. But no one would think it, to look at me now. I was once engaged to a swallow, but I fell in here from the gutter under the roof, and I have lain here more than 5 years, and have been thoroughly drenched. Believe me, it is a long time for a young maiden." The top said nothing, but he thought of his old love, and the more she said, the more clear it became to him that this was the same ball. The servant then came to clean out the dustbin. "Ah," she exclaimed, "here is a gilt top." So the top was brought again to notice and honour, but nothing more was heard of the little ball. He spoke not a word about his old love, for that soon died away. When the beloved object has lain for 5 years in a gutter and has been drenched through, no one cares to know her again on meeting her in a dustbin. The Wicked Prince. There lived once upon a time a wicked prince whose heart and mind were set upon conquering all the countries of the world and on frightening the people. He devastated their countries with fire and sword, and his soldiers trod down the crops in the fields and destroyed the peasants' huts by fire, so that the flames licked the green leaves off the branches, and the fruit hung dried up on the singed black trees. Many a poor mother fled, her naked baby in her arms, behind the still smoking walls of her cottage. But also there the soldiers followed her, and when they found her, she served as new nourishment to their diabolical enjoyments. Demons could not possibly have done worse things than these soldiers. The prince was of opinion that all this was right, and that it was only the natural course which things ought to take. His power increased day by day, his name was feared by all, and fortune favoured his deeds. He brought enormous wealth home from the conquered towns, and gradually accumulated in his residence riches which could nowhere be equalled. He erected magnificent palaces, churches, and halls, and all who saw these splendid buildings and great treasures exclaimed admiringly, "What a mighty prince!" But they did not know what endless misery he had brought upon other countries, nor did they hear the sighs and lamentations which rose up from the debris of the destroyed cities. The prince often looked with delight upon his gold and his magnificent edifices, and thought, like the crowd, "What a mighty prince! But I must have more, much more. No power on earth must equal mine, far less exceed it." He made war with all his neighbors and defeated them. The conquered kings were chained up with golden fetters to his chariot when he drove through the streets of his city. These kings had to kneel at his and his courtiers' feet when they sat at table, and live on the morsels which they left. At last the prince had his own statue erected on the public places and fixed on the royal palaces. Nay, he even wished it to be placed in the churches, on the altars. But in this the priests opposed him, saying, "Prince, you are mighty indeed, but God's power is much greater than yours. We dare not obey your orders." "Well," said the prince, "then I will conquer God too." And in his haughtiness and foolish presumption, he ordered a magnificent ship to be constructed, with which he could sail through the air. It was gorgeously fitted out and of many colours. Like the tail of a peacock, it was covered with thousands of eyes, but each eye was the barrel of a gun. The prince sat in the centre of the ship and had only to touch a spring in order to make thousands of bullets fly out in all directions, while the guns were at once loaded again. Hundreds of eagles were attached to this ship, and it rose with the swiftness of an arrow up towards the sun. The earth was soon left far below, and looked, with its mountains and woods, like a cornfield, where the plough had made furrows, which separated green meadows. Soon it looked only like a map with indistinct lines upon it, and at last it entirely disappeared in mist and clouds. Higher and higher rose the eagles up into the air. Then God sent one of his numberless angels against the ship. The wicked prince showered thousands of bullets upon him, but they rebounded from his shining wings and fell down like ordinary hailstones. One drop of blood, one single drop, came out of the white feathers of the angel's wings and fell upon the ship in which the prince sat, burnt into it, and weighed upon it like thousands of hundredweights, dragging it rapidly down to the earth again. The strong wings of the eagles gave way, the wind roared round the prince's head, and the clouds around, were they formed by the smoke rising up from the burnt cities, took strange shapes, like crabs many, many miles long, which stretched their claws out after him and rose up like enormous rocks, from which rolling masses dashed down and became fire-spitting dragons. The prince was lying half dead in his ship, when it sank at last with a terrible shock into the branches of a large tree in the wood. "I will conquer God," said the prince. "I have sworn it. My will must be done." And he spent 7 years in the construction of wonderful ships to sail through the air, and had darts cast from the hardest steel to break the walls of heaven with. He gathered warriors from all countries, so many that when they were placed side by side, they covered the space of several miles. They entered the ships, and the prince was approaching his own, when God sent a swarm of gnats, one swarm of little gnats. They buzzed round the prince and stung his face and hands. Angrily he drew his sword and brandished it, but he only touched the air and did not hit the gnats. Then he ordered his servants to bring costly coverings and wrap him in them, that the gnats might no longer be able to reach him. The servants carried out his orders, but one single gnat had placed itself inside one of the coverings, crept into the prince's ear, and stung him. The place burnt like fire, and the poison entered into his blood. Mad with pain, he tore off the coverings in his clothes too, flinging them far away, and danced about before the eyes of his ferocious soldiers, who now mocked at him, the mad prince, who wished to make war with God, and was overcome by a single little gnat. And so, our quest through these timeless tales comes to an end. With the story's final words, you have completed this sleepy quest. May your dreams be filled with magic until the next adventure begins. Rest well, traveller.